Today, we're working on a 2006 Ford F-250 6-liter Power Stroke diesel, and we're going to be doing the standpipe and dummy plug kit on this truck. Now, there's a few reasons for that. We need to go in and do the injectors anyway, and also, we're not sure if this vehicle has ever had the updated design standpipe and dummy plug kit, such as this, where it's a two-piece design. Now, that was changed a while back, but it is kind of important that it does get the updated change because it is a benefit to the truck. Not only with the fact that it has newer, better O-rings, as well as Teflon rings, but it's a little bit easier to install in some cases as well. And so again, we're doing the kit because, one, we don't know if it's had it done before. We're doing all 8 injectors, so why not go ahead and get 2 new standpipes and 2 new dummy plug kits in, along with our 2 plug as well. Now, a couple things to note on here, and it's very important to keep mindful of whenever you're doing this kit. Yes, it has been updated. It does have a better O-ring now. It has a better Teflon ring around it, but these are exposed to very, very high temperatures of oil as well as pressure bypassing this seal. So we don't want in any way to crimp, cut, or pinch this O-ring whenever we're installing it. So the reason I'm telling you that is if you have the cab off, obviously it's going to be easy. You can put the whole thing in. No problem at all. However, if the cab is on because of clearance issues, you're going to have to separate the 2 pieces. So when you do that, we want to make sure that, one, you really only do it one time. Go ahead and pull it out, get the bottom piece in, and then when you go to put the top piece back on, we want to generously lubricate this O-ring. Now, you can use fresh clean motor oil, you can use engine assembly lube, whatever the case may be, but we definitely want to generously lubricate this, and that goes with any of the O-rings on this standpipe. Keep in mind, again, this is going to be exposed to very high temperatures and very high pressure, so we want to make sure it glides in and we don't have any pinching or crimping here. And it's also important to note on the longer portion of the standpipe, if you're doing it with the cab on and you're doing it in 2 pieces, when you slide this down where it goes, there's no need to beat or bang it in with a hammer. Put it in as far as you can by hand, and then once you put the manifold back on, and we'll show you this, you'll be able to tighten down the top piece, and when you torque that down to 60 foot-pounds, it's actually going to make the connection into the longer piece, and it's going to drive both pieces all the way in to where they'll be seated properly and torqued properly as well. And again, that's another reason we want to generously lubricate these O-rings so that there's no damage done to them when we're doing that torque sequence. So again, the notes here, one, this is the updated design, so we're going to upgrade this truck a little bit. But also, when we insert this, we're going to make sure that we don't take this in and out too many times. If we can, let's limit it to one time, pulling it out of the longer portion. And then when we lubricate it, we'll put it back in. And then again, if you're doing it with the cab on, go ahead and put your longer portion in first, and then lightly place your manifold on. And when you put your manifold on and get it torqued down, you can then put the top portion of the standpipe in, and it will torque down to 60 foot-pounds and drive the rest of the assembly all the way in. Now, even though this is just a dummy plug, it's going to have that updated Teflon ring as well as O-rings as well. So we want to lubricate this also when we put that in. Even though it is a dummy plug, we want to keep up with the consistency in the way that we install these components for this truck. So we'll get over to the truck, we'll show you some of the steps we're going to have to make, and then we'll get into changing out these standpipes and these dummy plugs. Now, as you can see, we've already done a lot of the pre-work to access the standpipes here, but just to give you an idea, obviously the valve cover has to come off. You know, we got to get the coolant reservoir out of the way, we need to get the downpipe out of the way, the fuel injection control module out of the way, just so we can get access to the manifold itself and the standpipe and the dummy plug on both the driver and the passenger side. Now, it's important to note here that you know, we have the cab on this truck, so we want to make sure we pull this out in 2 pieces because we are going to run into clearance issues if we don't. And that's going to be on both the driver and the passenger side. If you try to pull the standpipe out, it's going to knock into something on either side. And so here we have our standpipe on the driver's side. And then on the opposite of that, it's going to be the dummy plug, and it's just the reverse of this on the passenger side. So it's going to be the same either way, but you are going to run into those clearance issues, whether it's the driver's side or passenger side, especially on the passenger side. That's where it's going to be more difficult because of the AC box. Now with this truck, we also don't know if this is the two-piece design or the one-piece design that's already in here. We're hoping it's the two-piece because that will make it a lot easier to get it out. But you know, if it is the one-piece, this is going to be one of those times where you just want to be very delicate with the manifold itself. You may have to move it and shift it, go back and forth with it to get this out completely with that one-piece design in there. But fortunately, once we put this back together, it will be the two-piece design, so it'll make the job a lot easier to put back together versus pulling out if it's not the updated design that's in there already. And so at this point, we can now go ahead and remove the dummy plug, and then we can go ahead and also pull the top portion of the standpipe if it is the two-piece design. We'll get those out of the way, and then we'll start pulling the bolts for the manifold so we can get the manifold out of the way. And so now we'll start by removing the dummy plug. And you know, again, this is one of those that you're not going to have an issue with. Shouldn't have any clearance issues at all, as long as you have everything out of the way that was supposed to be out of the way. And then we'll move along to the standpipe. And again, we're hoping this is already the two-piece design. It appears as though we're in luck. We do have the two-piece design, so this does make it a little bit easier for us. We have the top portion out of the way already, and now we can move on to working on things like getting the manifold off completely so that we can start working on putting the new standpipe in. Now, an important note to make here, when you are removing the manifold bolts, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and keep a finger near the bolt as you're pulling it out, because these bolts are fairly small, and if you drop one down to where the injectors are, top of the head, sometimes they're very easy to recover, and sometimes it takes forever to find them. And then, you know, a lot of times you'll have to get a long extendable magnet to find them, and just makes your job a lot harder. It takes a little bit longer to get things done as well. So just be mindful of that when you're pulling the manifold bolts. Keep those pretty close, and then put them to the side as soon as you get them out. And now with our manifold bolts out of the way, we can lift straight up with the oil rail manifold itself, get it out of the way. And just another quick note here, you're in here already doing the standpipe and the dummy plugs, you're doing the injectors, if that's what you're doing as well. You might as well go ahead and replace the oil rail ball tubes, or at least the seals to these while you're in here. They degrade over time as well, and there's nothing wrong with just adding a little bit more security to the job while you're in there, and you've already done all this pre-work leading up to putting the standpipe and dummy plug kit in. And so now that we have the manifold off, we can access the longer portion of the standpipe itself. And there is a specialty tool for this. However, you can just use a longer pair of needle nose pliers, get a good grip, and then pull straight up with it. Now it may take a little bit of wiggling and twisting on the standpipe itself, but once it's freed up, it'll pull right out. And one thing to note is it's very important to make sure we look at the bottom of the standpipe and look at the seal and make sure nothing was left behind. If the entirety of the seal is on the long portion of the standpipe, that gives us some confidence that we're not going to be putting the new standpipe in over the top of, you know, seal material or the entire seal, the O-ring itself, down in the hole. That's one thing we definitely don't want. And as I said in the beginning of the video, we're going to be doing the injectors on this truck. So if you are as well, a couple of quick tips for you. Always use a long shank Torx bit for removing the injector bolt. That way it doesn't rest against the side of the solenoid and damage the solenoid. That's especially important when you're putting the new injectors in. And then when it's time to press the electrical connector to the injector back through, there's a specialty tool for that you can use that'll actually slide in and pinch on the tabs of the electrical connector to the injector and push the electrical connector straight through without causing any damage to the connection itself. And again, that's especially true if you're putting a new injector in and for whatever reason you have to go back and pull that electrical connection. You won't damage it on the new injector that you just installed. And so now we'll go ahead and get these injectors finished up, and once we're done with that, we'll come back and show you the rest of the process of getting the standpipe and dummy plug kits installed. Now that the injectors are reinstalled, it's time to go ahead and put the manifold back in place. Now we have this old plug that's at the end of the manifold, and we got a new one with the kit to replace that old plug. So since it came in the kit, we're going to go ahead and replace that prior to putting the manifold back on the vehicle. Now prior to putting on the manifold, we're going to go ahead and take the longer portion of the standpipe and put it back down in the tube. Now we're not going to force it, we're just going to push it down by hand, not going to use any tools or anything like that, and you'll see why here in just a moment. But We went ahead and put a generous amount of engine assembly lube on the end of the standpipe around the O-ring, and that's going to prevent that O-ring from getting damaged whenever it is put down in the tube, and also when it's torqued down with the shorter portion of the standpipe at the end of this. And so we'll put it down in the tube and we'll make sure that we lube it up properly. That way there's no tearing or crimping or pinching of that O-ring in the process. And now with the longer portion of the standpipe in the tube and the manifold placed back on, we can now take and again generously lube the end of the short piece of the standpipe and put it back into place. Now again, we're not going to tighten this down all the way just yet. We're going to go ahead and put this in. We're also going to get the dummy plug in, as you see, on the other end of the manifold. We're just going to thread it down a little bit. But right at this point, we don't have the manifold torqued back down yet. We want to torque that down first. So we'll just guide these in. We'll then go back and we will torque down the manifold itself. And then we can finish up by tightening up both the dummy plug and the standpipe. And now with the manifold tightened down enough, we can go back and we can tighten down the dummy plug. And then we can go and tighten down the standpipe. We're going to torque that down to 60 foot-pounds. And that's the reason we went ahead and just placed the longer portion of the standpipe in the tube. We didn't really have to force that because now, once we tighten down the standpipe altogether to that 60 foot-pounds, it's going to do a couple things. It's going to push the longer portion all the way in to make that seal. And we know we're not going to tear or mess up the O-ring because it's lubricated properly. But it's also, when we torque it down, it's going to make that union between the short piece and the long piece of the standpipe. So that's all we have left. Tighten down the dummy plug, torque down the standpipe itself to 60 foot-pounds, and then get everything wrapped back up and get this truck back on the road. And hopefully now you have a better understanding of what it takes to replace the standpipe and dummy plug kit on this 2006 Ford F-250 Power Stroke diesel.